Hi everyone, and welcome to Therapy Unfiltered. I'm Joe Valder, clinical counselor here, counseling services at Johnson & Wales University. On this show, we take the mystery out of mental health and help you understand what it's really like to sit on the couch. It's time to take a deep breath and dive in. Welcome everyone. My name is Joe Valder, and this is the first episode of Therapy Unfiltered. My goal is to make therapy and to make counseling and all the things we do at counseling services a bit more understandable and easier to approach, and basically demystify exactly what happens when you come in to meet with us. And so my goal here is to talk about therapy and to talk about mental health and, to talk about what it means to see a therapist and what might happen in a session and, what comes on after that. And so I thought a good way to start with that was to have a very special guest today. On our very first episode, Stephanie Dixon, Clinical Director of Counseling Services at Johnson & Wales. And she's here to talk just a bit more about herself, perhaps, and to also talk about, what we do at Counseling Services and how to best approach us. So, Stephanie?
Well, thank you, Joe. It's nice to be here. I'm excited that we are starting this process, and it's a new way for us to connect with students and our broader JWU community. So, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and thanks so much. Obviously it's our first episode, so there's a lot of pressure. It's a very big deal, I'm sure, with all the listeners. And so let's say you're a student, right, and you decide you want to seek out a counselor. What do you do?
So I think the first thing that is important is for, everybody to understand that Johnson & Wales University offers counseling services for its enrolled students. And our purpose really is to assist students with their overall emotional well-being. The service is available, like I said, for actively enrolled students. There's no additional charge for students to come in and see us in counseling services. There's no co-payments, we don't take insurance. So really, if a student is struggling with something or needs support for their mental health or overall emotional well-being, they should seek us out. That's why we're here. And so students would call our office or come into our office to make an appointment. And we're located in Wales Hall on the second floor. And our phone number is 401-598-1016. Students can call and schedule an appointment. And if students are ever experiencing any kind of crisis, emergency, kind of in-the-moment panic, and they need to talk to somebody right away, then you can just walk in and ask to speak with the counselor on duty.
Well, thanks, Stephanie. That's, I think, a very good, introduction to some of the things we do at Counseling Services and how to seek us out. And one thing I think that was really notable you said there was that, we don't require insurance and there's no co-pays. And I think that's notable because, seeing a therapist when you're not in college can be really hard, right? I mean, I think you and I have both worked in the community, or at least have worked elsewhere out of colleges, and you have to worry about what insurance you have and what insurance the therapist takes, and then also about co-pays and missed appointment fees and all those sorts of things that, those things don't happen here at Johnson & Wales.
Right, and I think when you are making an appointment with a community provider, I think sometimes there can be a wait for that. It may take a few weeks depending on what type of provider you are trying to see. But here in counseling services, like I said, we have same-day access for students who need more urgent attention for something that is feeling really unmanageable or feeling more like a crisis. And then we do schedule appointments, and our average wait time is a couple of days. And that really depends on the student's schedule. We have openings for initial appointments every single day. And so we work with the student to, find an appointment time that's going to work best for their schedule. Because obviously we want them to, to be able to attend class, be able to attend labs. And so we're going to work with you to find a time that is most convenient for you.
Yeah, right. And that all starts with the call that you mentioned there earlier. And so when that happens, you'll get to speak with our lovely front desk person. Her name's Kim. She's really awesome and great. And what'll happen is, she'll just check in with what you're looking for, what kind of needs you might present with, and then also your availability. And once you're scheduled, then on the day of that scheduling, right, you'll get an email, right, or a text with something important.
Yeah, so we do text message reminders, and so students will get a text message from us the business day prior to their scheduled appointment, and that will remind them of the date and time of their appointment. And there will also be a web link that is included in that message. And that link should be clicked on the day of their scheduled appointment, right? And so when they click on that link, it's going to lead them to some initial paperwork, right? So consent forms, where you're giving us permission to work with you. Those forms are going to talk a little bit about confidentiality, which is very important. And then, when the student does meet with the staff counselor, there'll be a more in-depth conversation about confidentiality. And then there are going to be a series of questions that the paperwork is going to ask you that help us get an understanding of kind of baseline symptoms related to things like depression and anxiety, frustration, distress, things like that, where it's really important. It gives us a kind of a starting line of where somebody is emotionally, and can help us inform the work that we do with students, because we want to, whatever those symptoms are that are bringing them in, the goal is going to be to help them reduce the impact of those symptoms, right, for things to start to feel better.
And I think that's a really important piece you bring up there, is the impact of those symptoms.
Yes.
Because that's what can be most important, of course, right, for a person deciding to seek out therapy, is not just the experience of, depression or anxiety or whatever it is, but how that impacts all the functioning that we do every day. So for some students, right, it might mean that they're starting to feel so depressed they're sleeping in and missing class, right? Or maybe they're isolating from their friends and their friends are noticing a difference, or maybe they're so worried throughout the day that they can't focus on homework and they can't get it done, or they can't focus in class. So those are all the things, that during a intake session or during a conversation that the counselor's having with you, we're going to ask about, because that's really, that's what matters in life, right? That's what matters, is functioning, and it's, those sorts of things that can begin to tell a person when they should probably seek us out. Would you say?
Yeah, no, I for sure agree with all of that. And I think, we're all human, right? So we all experience emotions. So there are going to be times when all of us maybe experience stress, right? Like stress is a normal part of life. And, maybe we'll feel anxious from time to time, or feel sad or angry or frustrated, right? Those are all normal human emotions. And having those emotions doesn't mean that there's anything wrong, quote unquote, wrong with you, right? That's a normal part of the human experience. But when those emotions start to feel really overwhelming and unmanageable and start to become really persistent and, like you said, get in the way of your ideal functioning, right? Like that's when it is a good time to think about reaching out for some support, right? And thinking that, well, maybe it would be helpful if I talk to somebody about this, because I'm not doing well.
Right, and that's exactly what I wanted to bring up next, is that whole talk to somebody. Because of course, people have lots of folks in their lives, right? We have,
Yes.
all these natural supports, family and friends, and then there's us, us therapist folk over at Counseling Services. And so, an interesting question is, how would a person or a student know when it's time to seek out, us professional people, as opposed to like just saying, oh man, I gotta give my mom a call, or I need to call my, good friend from home, or something else like that. And I'm curious, Stephanie, if you had any thoughts about that distinction there. Like, when is it time for calling us Counseling Services, as opposed to when is it time to, lean on our other resources?
Yeah, so I think, I think that's an interesting question. And there may not always be such a clear-cut answer to that question.
Yeah.
What I would say is that all of us need to rely on our natural supports, right? So whether that's, friends, family, people that we're close to, people that know us, people that care about us, right? And that we feel comfortable talking to. Therapy, is never a substitution for that, right? when you're relying on your natural supports, or if you feel like you can't rely on your natural supports, because sometimes people feel uncomfortable sharing things, right?
Yeah.
And so if you feel like you can't really talk about what's happening with somebody in your life, that's maybe an indicator that, okay, maybe this is time to go and see somebody in counseling services and talk to somebody who's outside of the situation and who can be objective.
Yeah.
Right? But then also, if you are relying on those natural supports and things aren't getting any better and it's not feeling helpful, or you're not feeling heard or understood, or if you're starting to feel worse, right, then that's an indication that maybe there's something else going on, and maybe it would be helpful to reach out for some support from our office. I don't know, is there anything you want to add to that from your perspective?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And what I was thinking about as you're describing that experience is, when for a person it suddenly feels different. When perhaps they have a really bad day, and typically they can, go home and hang out with their roommates and do something fun, play video games, whatever it is, and feel good and start their next day. Whereas, opposed to an instance where they have a bad day and suddenly that stuff doesn't make them feel good, or they don't want to go see their roommates. Noticing these changes in yourself, I think, is an important thing to be able to reflect on, because it tells us, when something's different and when something's off, perhaps.
Sure.
And that's why I've often talked to folks in therapy about, keeping, even if it's like a journal or just like some sort of reflection, process, because sometimes it's hard to notice when things are different about us. Mm-hmm. That's why it's helpful sometimes to receive feedback from friends or family, because they might see it and we don't see it. They might be like, "Oh, wow, Joe, you're usually like making all these jokes in the evening and having a fun time, but past couple of days you've been, kind of quiet and not saying much." Someone might notice that, and it might tell them that something's going on for that person,
right,
when they might not see it themselves.
Right. And I think, you bring up a good point in that, it's important to pay attention to how we are doing, personally, right? But also paying attention to how your friends here on campus are doing, right? And if you notice that one of your friends is struggling and kind of maybe not reaching out as much, or not participating, not wanting to hang out, not wanting to go see that movie with you, not showing up to a study group, not, engaging in the regular day-to-day stuff that you all do, then that's an indication that, hey, maybe your friend might need some support. And I think a lot of times we have students here who will walk in with one of their friends as a support, right? To say, listen, I think it might be helpful for you to go to talk to somebody, but it might feel intimidating for that person to walk in. So it happens all the time where friends will come in just as a support, like, yeah, I'm here with my friend, they want to make an appointment. Yeah,
it's a very hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do, to seek out treatment or therapy or whatever it is, and I think that's why when you decide to do it and you're able to do it, it's important to give yourself, acknowledge that and give yourself, a pat on the back, because it's a hard thing to do.
It is.
And so that's why it's okay as well to say, hey, I need to come with a friend, or hey, I'd like to, come with even a group of friends. We got plenty of seats in that waiting room, I suppose. And so, it's okay if you feel like you need to come with a couple of people to be your support folks when you come in and see us. And with that, I don't know about you, Stephanie, but I often will talk to students about, once they're comfortable with our space, being that person for their friends, because once they know where we are in a Wales Hall there, second floor, they can be that outlet for another friend on campus who might say, oh, I don't even know where Wales Hall is. I'm over at Harborside, I don't go over there, whatever it is, and you can be that person, that resource for your friend who might be in need. And as Stephanie was saying too, it's really important to have these relationships with folks, because as I like to say a lot to people, people need people. We need each other, and one thing we need is for folks to kind of provide feedback. And that can be really hard to do, but it can be really important. And just kind of keeping in line here with more of the when to seek out counseling and how to approach us. We talked about more of the calling in and like scheduling an appointment process. But what about, Stephanie, if like you're having an absolute terrible day, like, I don't know, you failed an exam, or you just had a big breakup with somebody, or I don't know, something just really terrible in your life happened. What's the process there for something immediate? What's that look like?
For something immediate, if it's during business hours, right, which is, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, then you could literally walk into the office and say, I would like to talk to the counselor on duty. I'm having a really difficult time right now. We have a counselor on duty every day who is available to handle walk-in situations, right? Or even phone calls. If you don't feel like walking in is something that you'd like to do, but you'd like to call and say, listen, I'm really struggling right now with something. Is there somebody that I can speak to? The answer is going to be yes, right? So we always have a counselor on duty who can see a student in that moment of distress, right? So we also have an after hours on call, right? So that's one thing that I think is important for our students to know is that, when you're here, you have access to emergency mental health support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So counseling services is open during business hours, like we talked about. But then when we're not here, we have an after hours on call service. And you can get in touch with the after hours on call service in a couple of ways. One is by calling them directly, and that phone number is 888-222-4805, or by contacting Campus Safety and Security and asking to be connected to the after hours on call. Connecting with them either way is fine, whichever you prefer. But what's going to happen is that you're going to talk with a clinician about what's going on. They're going to ask you lots of questions, right? And kind of determine, your level of distress, level of safety, talk about ways of coping, what you need in that moment to get through, whether it's the night or the weekend. And then they are going to get in touch with us and let us know that you've had some contact with them. And then when we come into the office that next business day, we always follow up with those students and say, hey, we know you had some contact with our after hours on call. Would you like to come in and see somebody today? Do you want to check in? How are things going today? People get in touch with the after hours on call for lots of different reasons. So depending on what the issue is, may get a different response from us, right? We may follow up with an email. We may call you and ask you to come in. But we're going to know about that contact, and then we're gonna follow up with you to check in and make sure things are going okay.
Yeah, certainly. And, that can, again, just to acknowledge how hard that can be really hard to say I need to call these people, especially when it's like 2 a.m. or whatever it is. But it's an important step to take, for your own self-care and for your own wellness. And just to remember that, we're all worth it to seek out these services. We're worth it to take care of ourselves, and we're worth it to, pursue our own wellness, right?
Right, and if we're not feeling very good emotionally and mentally, it's going to be really hard for us to be able to engage academically.
Oh, exactly.
Right? So,
yeah.
So if you are struggling, then, we are one of the many resources that Johnson & Wales provides. And so, we are here for our students and because of our students, right? And so we want you, when you are struggling, we want you to come in, right? I think it can certainly be scary, right? Because, if you've never seen a therapist before, what's going to happen? What are they going to ask me? Well, we're going to ask you a lot of questions, right? We're going to ask you, what's bringing you in? How are things going? How are things going academically? How are things going socially? What is it that you're struggling with right now? Well, how would you like things to be, right? So it's going to be a conversation. Right. Between us and the student who's coming in. And then we're going to work together to come up with a plan around, okay, based on what you're struggling with, here's what we think might be helpful. Why don't we work together on these things to see if we can help your mood improve or help you feel better just in a general sense, or help you get more connected to your surroundings, right? Whatever, students coming to counseling for so many different reasons. And, we always say there's no issue too big or too small. But whatever plan we come up with is going to be based on what's bringing the student in, and it's going to be developed with the student. We're not here to tell students what to do, right? Right. We're here to help guide them and to help them process the difficult things that are getting in their way of being their best selves.
Right, certainly. And I would argue that most people, most students know the best things to do. It's just a matter of how hard it can be to do those things. Because, I always use the example of like someone who's, having a lot of challenges related to, alcohol use or substance use. That person, of course, a therapist, we don't just say to them, "Hey, stop drinking." That's
Right.
that's not the end result there. There's a whole big process there because most of the time folks know what to do. It's just such a hard thing to do. And
Sure.
so that's where the therapist can come in terms of different, interventions and all sorts of supports that can happen that can, aid in a person doing that. And it's going to look different for different people, right? I mean, some folks are going to come in, Stephanie, and meet with us for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 sessions and feel really good and feel like they've accomplished their goal. And they'll be like, all right, see you later. And then other folks might be like, hey, this therapy thing seems like it's helpful and I think I want to engage long term. And then that's the situation where, as clinical counselors here at Johnson & Wales, we're not equipped to be, like long-term therapists for people. So that's when we're going to help folks find a therapist in the community. Because that can be a little hard, too, to find a therapist out there in the world because there's a lot of them and there's all these letters after their name and there's all these insurances and all that. So it's a hard process. But that's another thing that I don't think we've talked about yet that we help people with is finding that therapist in the community. Because, again, it's going to be based on your insurance and based on all these different factors. And it's an important thing to do, and it's another thing that we can help with. And actually, sometimes people come in with that sole purpose, right? I mean, we help folks come in, they just say, hey, I need help finding a therapist, I'm having trouble.
Yeah. So we can, our services are meant to be short term, right? And I think, really what that means is that, when students come in to see us, they come in to see us for a period of time, right? And then we work with them to determine, okay, if you are feeling better, maybe we don't need to do this as frequently, or maybe you do a piece of work and you think it's an okay time to end. But like you said, Joe, when people feel like they need a level of support, that would be, I think it would be really helpful to talk with a therapist once a week, for the foreseeable future to help get me through the academic year. If somebody is at that level, then we want to work with that student to provide them support in the moment while we help them get connected, right? Because like we talked about before, sometimes waits for therapists off campus can be long, right? Or you don't know where to start. So start with us because we are here, we are accessible quickly, and we can provide that initial support. And if it does feel like something longer term would be helpful, then we can help you get connected to that in a way that I think would probably feel a little less stressful than if you were trying to navigate it on your own with never having done that before.
Yeah, no, definitely. It can be hard to do, and it's another thing that we can be helpful with. There's just I think several more things actually I was looking to discuss on this first episode, but it seems as though we've had a good bit of awesome content. So I think it actually might be a situation where we have like a 2-part episode.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, how do you feel about that,
I get to
Stephanie?
come back?
I think that might be appropriate here because, I think there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. And, I think it'd be good to keep these, episodes not too long because I know it can be very exciting to listen to, but we don't want to take up too much time of students' life here, especially with all the homework and all the self-care that's happening. So what do you think, Stephanie? Does that sound like a good idea to have a second part of this episode?
I think that's a great idea. I would love to come back and talk some
right.
more about this.
Is there anything you wanted to leave on today?
I just want to reiterate that, our team in counseling services, again, we are here because of our students and for our students, and we are very invested in our students doing well and being well. And so I really want our students to understand that there is no issue too big or too small to ask for help for. And we are, I think, the best place to start when you're struggling. So don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, I think it's a good message, because we all became therapists because we like people. I mean, we don't want to sit in an office all day with no one. I mean, those are like my worst days when I don't see any students. And so that's what we want in counseling service. And I even say to people, just feel free to come by and say hi to Kim and say hi to whoever's, a counselor on duty, just to kind of see the space, make it approachable, know where it is in that tricky Wales building, Wales Hall, because it's, hard to navigate in there. So you come in, you find us, and then when you need us, you know where to go. I often say, Stephanie, like people, well, hopefully at least they have a fire extinguisher in their house before they need it, right? And so you're prepared for something before you need it. And
Right.
so that's why, being prepared to come see us before you're actually in need, I think is really important.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, especially
Sure.
because in that moment, who knows how you're presenting? I mean, maybe you're really much more anxious than you normally are, much more like isolating than you normally are. And so suddenly it's harder to reach out to us. So it's just to make it as easy as possible. Come in, say hello whenever you want. And when you need us, we'll be there.
Sounds perfect.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Stephanie. And we'll check in again for our next episode.